Recording in progress.
Petaluma's Historic and Cultural Preservation Committee for Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. Can we get a roll call, please?
Perlis.
Present.
Committee member Pitangaro. Absent. Committee member Whitley.
Present.
Committee member Van Ameren.
Present.
Chair Reinhardt.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we'll have an opportunity for general public comment. During general public comment, the public is invited to make comments on items of public interest that are within the HCPC's subject matter jurisdiction and that are not listed on the current agenda. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Depending on the number of persons wishing to address the HCPC, time will be allocated in equal shares, totaling no more than 15 minutes. So that the public comment period is open. If you have any public comments, please submit your speaker cards to the clerk. I haven't received any. I acknowledge we have one public comment that we received prior to the meeting. Have we received any others?
No, it was just that one that was posted online, and it is also in the bag for community members to view.
Great. Do you have any speaker cards? Anyone? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Oh, sure. Why don't you be sure and fill out a speaker card after, if we haven't got it already. Yeah. Oh, great. Okay, Larry Lobel, please.
Yes, I'm Larry Lobel, resident of Petaluma, and I'm here to advocate for the placement of a historical marker to commemorate an important event that took place in Petaluma in 1865. It was a performance by a piano virtuoso named Louis Moreau Gottschalk. He was world famous at that time, and it was a very unusual event that he performed in Petaluma. That event has been commemorated here a couple of times. In 1995, there was a concert given here by a lady named Barbara Geary. It was given in one of the Petaluma Heritage Homes. And I also produced the concert that was performed at the Petaluma Museum in 2015 on July 27th, which was the exact 150th anniversary of the day that Gottschalk performed here. The performance took place in what was then called McCune's Hall or McCune's Block, right at the corner of Washington Street and what was then Main Street and now Petaluma Boulevard North. And I would like to see a plaque placed on that site commemorating that event. At the corner of that site now there's a small empty lot which I believe is owned by the city. That's where the Bill Soberanis plaque is located and the wrist wrestling championships. So it would be in that same vicinity on that lot. And I'm willing to partially fund it and do fundraising for it and provide the contractor to erect the plaque. It would be a plaque similar to ones that are already existing in certain areas around town. There's one up at the, I forget what it's called, on Petaluma Boulevard North. But it's a bronze plaque that's about, say, 18 inches wide, maybe 15 inches tall. And it's resting on two metal pillars, so something similar to that. So what I'd like to find out is how do I go about getting permission? Would the city agree to that? And anything else apropos that I need to know in order to make this go forward and happen? I thank the committee for listening to me.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have anybody else in the chambers wishing to speak? Do we have anybody online? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lobel. I think at the end of the meeting, we'll have an opportunity to discuss moving forward with that, but appreciate your persistence and your coming forward with it. Thank you. Okay. So with that, hereby close the public comment and move on to the next order of business, which is presentations. But we have no presentations for today, so close on that and move on to approval of minutes. So we have in front of us the minutes from May 9th, 2023. Does anybody have any changes they'd like to suggest? Okay. I just note there are a few misspellings of names scattered throughout.
Okay.
Doesn't bother me, but it's a fact. Okay, with that, then I would say minutes are hereby adopted as written. Okay, and then next, we have meeting item number 2. This is public hearings and matters for consideration. Item 2 was to be a public hearing, consideration of historic site plan and architectural review for a remodel in the Oak Hill Brewster District at 312 Liberty Street. And we've got a request to move that forward again to date certain of September 5th, 2023. Does anybody have any questions of staff about the continuation or of the application? No? Okay. Looks like we need a motion to continue that.
I'll move we continue that.
Thank you, Mr. Whitley.
Second.
Seconded by Committee Member Perlis. Vote.
Committee Member Perlis,
Aye.
Committee Member Pitangaro,
Aye.
Committee Member Whitley,
Aye.
Committee Member Van Omeren,
Aye, although I won't be present on that meeting.
Chair Reinhardt.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, see you next month. Okay, closing item 2 and moving on to item 3, which is consideration of a recommendation to approve historic site plan architectural review, subject to conditions of approval of proposed alterations of an existing 2-story single-family residential structure in the A Street Historic District and located at 515 B Street. So this item requires a public hearing and disclosure of any ex parte communications from anyone? Okay, seeing none. John, excuse me, Committee Member Perlis?
Given the distance between my property and this property, do I have to recuse myself, Dylan?
I'm sorry, Committee Member Perlis. What did you say?
Given the distance from my property to this property, do I have to recuse myself?
Yeah, and are you within 1,000 feet of the property? Do we check? Do we know?
Close.
Yeah.
I've recused myself for properties a little further away across the street.
Then probably to be safe, we should just recuse yourself if that's okay, and just stay for the record. I'm recusing myself because I'm within, close proximity to the property.
Okay, so I will recuse myself.
Mr. Brady, excuse me. The planning analyst had reviewed it prior to the meeting and confirmed that you're close, but you're not within 1,000 feet.
Oh, really?
Sure.
In that case, I retract that recusal.
Yeah, so anything past 1,000 feet, there is a strong presumption that there is not a conflict of interest. So I think here you are well within your rights to attend the meeting. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, welcome back, Committee Member Perlis. Any others? Okay. All right, so we begin with a presentation from our staff historic preservation specialist, Isabel Castellano. I need to acknowledge that the public hearing is hereby open, right? This is a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And this is for a presentation for the Nelson and Stratford residence expansion at the property of 515 B Street. Today's presentation aligns with the staff report, providing an overview of the HCPC role, the background, the project description, staff analysis, along with a concluding environmental review, a summary of the outreach and public comments, and staff recommendations. As part of the HCPC role, bringing forward this HSPAR application, determining the scope, and the HCPC role would determine if the project meets the applicable findings and regulations under the general plan, the demolition resolution, the A Street Historic Design Guidelines and Standards, the Secretary of Interior Standards, and the IZO within Chapter 15 and 24. The HCPC may also consider public comments and determine if the conditions of approval are adequate. A brief background for the property. It's located in the A Street Historic District in the middle of the district and its boundaries. The gross site is under 4,000 square feet and a living area of approximately around 2,000 square feet. Within this project and additional documentation, there was a HRE provided and prepared by APD Preservation, which provides an in-depth history to the subject property from 515 B Street, starting off as a single-story dwelling. Within the Sanborn maps you have here, this indicates the development on the site, with the rear additions noticed from 1906, 1910, and 1933. As we can note from the existing conditions, the craftsman's architectural style is the dominant style for the property. Those features include the gable roof and the overhangs, along with roof rafters, dormers, porches, decorative beams, columns or piers, along with painted stucco siding and a variety of windows, including single and double hung. From the existing rear additions in the Sanborn maps indicates the increase within the floor plan and from the first floor into including a half story above. The photographs provided in the project documentations also notes the rear elevation additions to the back. Briefly describing that the property is located in the general plan in the west sub-area, one of the oldest sub-areas in the city, and maintains a zoning of a mixed use to the historic district is also the A Street and includes its own design guidelines. And as mentioned before, it features the craftsman architectural style. Within this project, it is being proposed as an expansion to the rear with a two-story expansion of 578 square feet. This also includes a new garage to the rear of the property and a new deck along with a trellis of 10 feet in height. There is also a landscape improvement with that addition to the rear of the property. And I'll briefly go over the project description on the additional elevations, and we have the project architect present for us to discuss any additional details. The architect is Scott Landry in the audience with the two property owners, Marilyn Stratford and David Nelson. To demonstrate within the south elevation, the existing and proposed, we have indicated here for the proposed and the rear adaptation to the property, extending the existing ridge line to the back, noting the rear garage to the end of the lot, and the porch that connects the two structures, which includes the pergola, the gate, and the raised deck. Within the north elevation, a similar situation with the roof line extending forward and the ground floor with the mudroom, and we can see in the back for the garage. And I'll briefly run through this on the slides. And with the west and east front elevations, we have here the existing and the proposed. As you can see, most of the work occurs and is visual through the rear elevation, with solely the new garage visible from the street of B Street. We have here the mudroom in the back. You can see here the dormers on opposite side as part of that rear expansion, and the double door French doors leading into the raised deck with the pergola above. Within the south elevation, I just wanted to point out the differentiations between the new windows and skylights. This is a treatment to separate the rear extension as a new construction from the existing features and provides a visual separation between the new and the old. Again, here we have the dormers that you can be seen on opposite sides. And within discussions, we have labeled this window as window A, providing opportunities for other options, maintaining this window or having a balance of two narrow windows to complement the dormers above. And the architect will further describe the exterior materials proposing to this project. This is briefly to demonstrate that the existing conditions and the existing materials are to be carried forward towards the rear expansion. And briefly go over the staff's analysis in terms of the regulations, and we'll further discuss the project in detail. Following the A Street Historic Design Guidelines, the two main features to address is the roofline and the facades. The changes proposed as part of the rear expansions. The project was reviewed and analyzed as being appropriate for new construction to an existing structure in the historic district. Within the Secretary of Interior standards, these are the basic standards for new construction and expansions within properties in historic districts. And the first one, noting that there's no changes to the use of the property. It remains as existing style of the craftsman. There's no false or inclusion of new historic additions. The historic features removed from those front and rear additions do not affect the overall appearance. And the exterior materials and finishes are consistent within the rear addition and the garage. Instead of removing the front, any features from the front, all the work is to the rear, removing of those former rear additions that did not impact the character. There's no physical treatments applied for this project. There's no work being proposed for the undisturbed ground as part of any potential archaeological resources. There is a condition if there is something discovered through the project. Any new work that is compatible and part of this project includes the massing, size, and scale, and it maintains the building's existing maximum height and matches its exterior materials. This part of the project is in the rear and can be removed in the future without impacting the structure's form or integrity. Just to summarize, within the IZO in Chapter 15, it meets the standards following the previous design guidelines and reviews of aesthetics. It also meets Chapter 24 when it reviewed against architectural style, sitting, residential use, ridge line, and description in height and color. And this project also falls under CEQA compliance as exemption through 3 sections of existing facilities, additional structures, and as a historic feature within the historic district. We have a summary as part of the outreach. There was a neighborhood outreach meeting facilitated by the architect and the property owners on May 11th. The public noticing for today's meeting was sent out at end of July, and that included mailed notices, and we have not received any public comments for this project. It is recommended the project is adopted with a resolution approving the HSPAR with alterations and subject to conditions of approvals. The first 2 planning conditions of approval are in terms of if there are any chemical or physical treatments and if there's any archaeological resources found. The third condition being mentioned in the staff report is to address the window A if there's opportunity for replacement or a redesign for a pair of narrow windows to balance with the dormer above. And this is the window A on the south living room. This condition also places the opportunity if there is a desire to put side light windows on opposite sides of the French door. And lastly, a condition if there's any minor landscape improvements that would be of interest, that it would be reviewed and subject to administrative review and approval. If there's any other further questions, I'm here, and we anticipate the architect to provide his own presentation in terms of the aesthetics and visuals for today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Castellano. Would the applicant like to add? Please do.
Hi, I'm Scott Landry with Studio 101 Designs, speaking on behalf of owners David Nelson and Marilyn Stratford. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Isabel. Great presentation there. I just want to kind of highlight some of our design strategies on this. Isabel did a great job, but we're here to answer questions and kind of expand on some things. With that, let's see if I can control this. Sorry. Just trying to brief history of I'm sorry. Here we go. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties here. This is our best guess at the history of this house, just a little more graphically. The house started as a simple, based on Sanborn maps, our HRE report, and kind of physical evidence within the attic spaces and things like that. House started as a simple 1.5-story home with a steeply pitched gable that ran from front of the house to the rear wall of the existing dining room. There we go. Over the past 100 years, the house was expanded multiple times, leading to a house that is stylistically correct along the street frontage and melts into an eclectic blend of mismatched architectural forms in the rear. These forms include an out-of-place dormer above the dining room, and extremely low-pitched shed roofs in back, and just probably about 4 or 5 different roof forms. So our goal with the rehabilitation is to preserve the period-correct front of the house, including what's going on inside, too. There's a great dining room, the parlor space, the staircase, all this stuff wants to remain the same. We want to preserve the front of the house and replace the troubled areas by extending the roof form back to capture the entire lower level and make a more usable upper level. This creates 3 distinct architectural zones: the front historic portion, the rear modern portion right over here, and the central connection piece to create a distinction between the two. So we have indented windows, basically a light well going down the center of the home that separates this historic zone from the new area. materials and details in the historic area will stay the same, and I can speak to any of those. You know, we have wood horizontal V-groove siding, as she said, Craftsman style stylings, brackets and things like that, steep pitch roofs. While the modern area will include modernized versions, matching in scale and color, but not competing with the historic craftsmanship. And that's why we wanted to separate those two zones. For instance, 5-inch horizontal poly-ash siding will harmonize with the existing 2.5-inch V-groove, aligning on every other course. The connection zone, in the center of those two, bridges the gap between the two zones by introducing dark stained wood and new combination windows that transition to skylights, like you see in the center there. Windows in the connection in modern areas will be aluminum clad wood products, while windows in the historic zone are slated to remain in our proposal. We have been exploring remedies for underperforming and inoperable windows. With the investment into the home and energy upgrades associated, we'd like the committee's guidance in further exploring replacing windows in the historic area. It's not on the table as part of this proposal, I get, but you know, how to best go about that. We have found manufacturers that say they can match, you know, new products with their historic counterparts. But we'd like the historic area to have kind of these higher performance that match the existing design and dimensions. That's all for my my breakdown here, but happy to answer any questions specific to materials, design, anything.
Great, thank you. Before we move into comments, do we have any committee member questions for the staff or the applicant? Committee member Van Armour?
Can you talk a little bit more about the garage, the location exactly, and also the materials?
The materials are consistent with the addition. So horizontal V-groove siding, 5-inch on center. That's the poly-ash painted to match the existing 2.5-inch V-groove. That's the main body. We have a bump out that's sided in shingles, complementary to the dormer pieces and other bump outs on the house, the upper crown. The placement of it is consistent with the existing carport. There's a trellis carport that's goes all the way to the fence right now. We're removing that. It's the only place where we can get a car on the property. It is attached to the house via the trellis, and thus able to go kind of zero lot line. It's part of the main house.
But it's all the way to the back of the property, right?
It does.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant or for staff? Okay, seeing none. I have just a couple minor ones. The staff report mentions new diamond pattern windows, and I don't see any in the elevations. Are there?
Yeah, we
proposed?
talked about, no,
Yeah,
they're
okay.
not. Yeah, exactly.
Good. Then wondering about the deck, the fencing, and the trellis. I see in this elevation, but I was wondering if they were painted or if they're going to be stain or paint.
They were not proposed as painted. They were wood. They can be painted to match the bracket, and that's a actually decent idea. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all for me. Okay, at this point, we open this up for public comment. I don't see anybody in the chamber, but have we received any cards or anybody online wishing to speak?
No comments were received prior to the meeting for this item, and there are no cards either.
All right, anybody in the chamber wishing to speak? No? Okay, with that, public comment period is closed and the public hearing is also closed. And we'll bring it back to the committee for comments. Anyone wish to kick it off? Committee member Perlis?
I will. Overall, I think it's a very appropriate and nicely balanced design. I don't have strong feelings about the two vertical windows versus what's there, and I know that it looks like you've got a sort of a great room area there, and you may have plans for that long stretch of wall. So I wouldn't argue too strongly for one type of window or another in that area. As far as the siding for the addition, it's admirable, I think, to want to add one more level of differentiation to the original structure. But since you're replacing add-ons that had matching siding to the original structure, I also wouldn't have any problem if you went with a matching siding to what was in the front, personally. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Committee Member Perlis. Next.
Overall, I'd just like to say I think the proposed addition looks really nice and really consistent with the standards and guidelines. And I don't have any additional comments on that.
Thank you. Committee Member Von Armoy.
Thanks. In general, I think it's a great project. I do think it's a substantial addition. I mean, 578 square feet, from 2,000. So, I mean, I do think it's, but it's all in the back, so it's not facing the street at all. Let's see. It's an old residence, it has a lot of history, and all the alterations and additions over time. It's too bad there's no very early images. It'd be great to see some of those early images. And speaking of that, historic resource evaluation was very rich in its history, and I want to talk a little bit more how we can preserve those kind of reports. I don't have a preference as far as the facade either. I'm open to either one. I had some concerns about the garage. I couldn't tell where it was placed, but it looks like it's all the way in the back. I'm good with the two new dormers that mimicked existing dormers. I'm fine with that as well. For the rest, I agree with the staff report with all the, it keeps the integrity. It doesn't alter the craftsman style at all. I did notice it was Heritage Homes, so hopefully, and also that it's eligible for the California Register, so hopefully those two things can be pursued. We're very much into preserving history. So we can certainly help with those steps as well. So overall, a great project. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think the project looks great. I appreciate sort of cleaning up the mishmash of additions that kind of are tacked on over time. I like the clear delineation between the new and the old. And I appreciate the slight difference in the facade materials, right, to really differentiate between the old and the new and the historic. So overall, I think it's a great project. Like it. The window that I think staff had talked about, and I should have asked this question earlier, just sort of why it was situated sort of all the way to the end, this window way that was talked about, as opposed to centering it or balancing it with the old structure. But other than that, I don't really think I have any fault with the project at all.
All right, thank you. That leaves me. So I agree. I think it's perfectly compatible. I'm pleased with the application. I think it's very well done. And I also want to thank the applicant and the Historic Resources Consultant and Isabel for preparing excellent staff report. And I agree. I thought the HRE was fun to read, having known people who've lived in the house. And I think it should be pointed out, it wasn't mentioned, but Warren Salmons, who lived there, was the assistant city manager and was instrumental in establishing the A Street Historic District. So I think that's, he'd be pleased, I think. But in general, yeah, I agree. I think it's terrific. I would say, following up on my comment about painting, I think that painting the fence and the trellis would really help to unify the garage with the house, and I think really go a long way, even though, we can't see it, but I think you'll appreciate that, and it will make for a more harmonious addition. Regarding John's comment about the siding, I agree with him, and I could go either way on that. I think if you felt that adding another was too busy for your taste, I think it would be acceptable to match existing, but leave it to you. Regarding the added conditions of approval for the window placement, I agree with staff analysis of window A's placement is awkward, but not having the interior elevations, I understand that may be the only place where it fits. But I would, and I wouldn't want to dictate that, it needs to be two specifically located windows, but I would encourage you to explore, something, if that's the living room, it seems to me that a window could have indoor and outdoor purpose that's a little more comfortable than that. And maybe, if it did have like the one on the front with the diamond lights, maybe that's a cool addition that you could do that even might help that placement feel a little more comfortable. And then regarding the French doors, adding side lights, again, I think, I think that's a nice idea. If it worked with whatever you have plans for the interior, that's be acceptable. But again, I think it's up to you. And but I think the conditions as written are good. That we can defer that to administrative review, whatever you propose. But certainly, I would take the considerations to heart. Otherwise, really, I find it's appropriate, and just hope that you can. I see the plans have a date on them that's about a year ago, so I appreciate your patience and perseverance, and hope you can get it permitted and built and move in and enjoy it as soon as possible. So, nothing more. If anybody else has any follow-up, or can we get a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll move to approve it.
Okay.
I'd second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Committee Member Whitley and seconded by Committee Member Pitangaro. Vote?
Committee Member Perlis,
Aye.
Committee Member Pitangaro,
Aye.
Committee Member Whitley,
Aye.
Committee Member Van Almeren,
Aye.
Chair Reinhardt.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, that closes that item, and again, unanimous approval. Thank you, everyone. Next, we have an opportunity for committee member comments. Let's see, I know Committee Member Perlis has a few. Why don't you kick it off?
Yes, I would request that we add an agenda item to our next meeting, whenever that takes place, to discuss and potentially vote on committee recommendation for the Structures of Merit program adapted from Santa Barbara, and also considering other alternatives. So and I suggested it as into the future, so that committee members can review the presentation and think about what they would like to say.
So looking for an agenda item in an upcoming meeting to discuss that. Great. Okay. Any further committee member comments? Sir, Committee Member Whitley.
Yes, I had a question for staff, actually. I didn't want to bring this up during the review of the structure, but I was wondering, does the city provide applicants or homeowners with information when they're given the stipulation that they have to protect or preserve archaeological resources? Does the city provide any kind of guidance on how to recognize those resources when there's ground disturbance?
And this is in regards to archaeological resources or historic
Yeah.
resources?
No,
in general?
archaeological ones specifically. I mean, I saw the stipulation that, I know this is not a CEQA or it's a categorically excluded project, or when there are categorically excluded projects, and the city is suggesting that they avoid or protect significant archaeological resources. I'm just wondering, does the city provide any information on how to recognize significant archaeological resources.
I can say so far from early discussions when applicants come in with a HSPAR application or an inquiry, we take a preliminary look at the site and the scope of the project. If the work is predominantly above ground, it's primarily towards the structure and that type of historic resource. If there is a larger project that involves and would have that archaeological component, potential component, we would request additional resources from the applicant as part of the documentation that's necessary. Usually that type of level of information is not provided to the public for confidential resources. And
So-
it really depends on the project when it comes in, the level of review that's required in the documentation.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, for example, not in a situation where you necessarily are requesting an archaeological survey, but in a situation where you've told the applicant, we don't think you're disturbing anything, but we don't want you to disturb any significant archaeological resources. Is there, for example, when we do this work in San Francisco, we provide the construction crew with an alert sheet. It's just a couple of pieces of paper that shows them, what it is that they should notify somebody if they do uncover, like human remains, for example. If there's no archaeological survey that's been required, but the backs of all of these historic homes in Petaluma often have wells or privies in them from the 1870s, 1880s, whatever. Generally, they're not going to be significant, but there are examples where there are significant materials there. And if the homeowner hasn't done an archaeological survey, and that's not required, but their construction crew does disturb something, I'm just wondering if the homeowners have been kind of briefed on what it is they should be looking for.
We don't typically provide that. I think when we're conditioning a project using a mitigation measure from a CEQA document, typically that mitigation measure will provide more detail. But I think what we could do, we just had a conversation yesterday about reviewing and updating our standard conditions of approval. And for a project that's been determined to be categorically exempt, this is a standard condition of approval. And so we could definitely work in either into the condition itself or as an additional handout that information. I think that would be some great guidance for the homeowner, especially to pass along to the contractor who's doing the work, right?
Yeah. I mean, because looking at the stipulations for this project and specifically, if I were the homeowner, I'd be looking at that saying, what does that mean? What is a significant archaeological resource, and how am I going to recognize it if I do see it? So I think some guidance there might be useful.
Sure, we can do that. Thank you.
Great. I could see that working its way into, as part of the ad hoc committee IZO update, long-term as a revised standard condition of approval or some other measure. That's a great suggestion. Okay, any other committee member comments? Okay, seeing none. I've got four. Let's see. I want to continue discussing the ad hoc committee update, and as John mentioned, certainly the Structures of Merit program is one of the recommendations we'll be making as far as the ad hoc committee. Regarding IZO and smart code update recommendations and such, we're continuing to work on that. I've received feedback from a couple more stakeholders, and was going to close the book on that and continue compiling. But after reviewing that evaluation for 515 B Street, I thought, maybe we should reach out to some more consultants and see what they have to say. But anyway, our goal then is to have the ad hoc committee, John and me, get the summary together and submit it to Isabel for consideration for her review and hopefully consideration at a meeting soon. So that's an update on that. Next, regarding Mr. Lobel's request for consideration of a monument at it's 312 East Washington, I would like to know, I know that it's something that's he's been asking about for some time now, and even to me, I don't have a clear vision of, what would be required. I imagine if it was a private property, it would be, somebody's right to do that. But given that it's a city-owned parcel, it would probably require an encroachment permit and public improvements and a process and an easement or who knows what. But I think we owe it to him to let's get a straight answer together. And so I'd like to get this on the agenda for, what would be required so that we can tell him and also so that we can consider whether or not we believe it's merited. And I think that, I appreciate that he has an idea of what it would look like and is willing to fund that or partially. But I think, with that parcel already having the Sobranis monument on it, I mean, maybe it's something different. I just think it's worth it considering, and it maybe a site visit would be warranted if we could find a creative way. Maybe it's even simpler, it's a ground-mounted thing, but it's equally impactful. So anyway, I think my questions are, what would move that forward? Is it a nomination for a landmark? How can we process that? So that's my question to staff, and I'd like to see that on an agenda, at least so we can review and possibly include a field visit. So next then, I think we talked about this before, but I just want to ask again, regarding the historic resource evaluations, such as the one we got for this one, it seems like it would be so easy to just link those on the city's GIS map page, with the other record documents. And I mean, I think it's a really valuable one that they're all valuable. And, if somebody in a nearby parcel could just review that and give them a head start, or it sets a standard too. So I just wonder what it would take to get those things linked to the city's GIS map page. I mean, I know we don't put everybody's applications and plans and things, but a historic resource evaluation seems to, warrant, being a public document and being available. So
I think that's certainly one option. We do of course maintain it in the project's public record. So, this it's included in this public record, and it will then be uploaded to Laserfiche, which is a trusted archive, and so it will always be available there. I think when I was with the city of Santa Rosa, we would oftentimes ask the applicant or property owner to take it over to Sonoma County Historical Society and archive it there, which I feel is a sort of probably a more accessible permanent archive, and I think perhaps more researchable. But I think certainly we can find outside of the public record archive at the city, we could find a location for it. But I would be interested to know if there's not another community resource that might be able to hold it.
I do know that, like Diana Painter, when she does hers, she files them at the history room at the Sonoma County Library at the Petaluma branch. She files them with the museum, in the library at the museum, and with Northwest Information Center if there's any nexus there. So she does. That's great. But I would think, well, two things. One is when I'm working on a parcel, I always go through the map page and I click on all the neighboring parcels, and then you get improvement plans or record drawings and stuff that were prepared for those. And to me, if you were to happen upon an HRE for an adjacent property, I just think that would be a great resource. And they seem so simple because they're, improvement plans are just linked, like they're on a server, and you click on it. So I think it would be valuable. I don't want to create a lot of work, but maybe that's another long-term goal, is to go back and catalog those. But yeah, also requesting of the applicant that they file them, remind them that they can file them at the library and the museum. That would be good. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Then I think last, I missed one. Okay. But I do want to, I just want to say, I've been at a couple meetings lately where there's been like a lot of negative feedback sort of sprayed on M Group and our staff planners. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to publicly acknowledge that, since I've been on this committee, I think the liaisons we've had, the planners and the technical staff have all been great and served this committee very well. And I think they've served the city well. And I think you know, all the information that's been provided has been, you know, complete and well organized and objective. And I think that we're lucky to have you. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, I wish you could all be city employees and have some budget maybe to help Mr. Lobel, you know, but that's another matter. So, you know, I just wanted to say thank you and acknowledge that in my opinion, you've served us well, and we're glad you're here. Okay. So that's it for me. So with that, then I'm going to turn it over to the planning manager. Oh, one more from committee member Van Armour.
Yeah, I just want to make two comments about what you said. On the plaques, if you need any help with that, I've been interested too, is because there are a lot of plaques in Petaluma. I'm wondering if there's a listing of it. I know some of them are private property, some of them are public, but so I'm willing to help with that. So let me know. And then on the historic resource evaluation, when I was in Stockton, what they did is they filed them with the University of Pacific. So there's a way. But if Diana Painter does like 3 resources, maybe we can give other applicants that guidance at least and have that choice. So maybe advocate for that. Thanks.
One more before we go to staff, and that is back about a month ago, a little more, I pounced a question to staff about 26 6th Street, and that I had noticed that it looked like they were raising the structure about 3.5 feet or so, and I did not remember that that was part of the plan, so I queried whether that was indeed part of the plans or whether things have moved on, and if so, what was the status? I hadn't heard back, so I just thought I'd rephrase the question now.
I think, Isabel, didn't you just look at that in the past week or so?
Right. I just wanted to confirm the property address, 26 6th Street. Yes. So this is an extensive project that had gone through HCPC quite some time ago in terms of raising the property and having interior and exterior alterations. That project is going through a couple of building revisions, and raising the property was part of the scope. I have been in contact with the architect and contractor as well, and there are a couple of modifications that we're looking into. But anything that is major that involves the exterior, of course, we'll be bringing it back to the HCPC if it falls under that scope. So far, it's been according to the project and minor changes regarding building details and product specifications. That's a project I'm working closely with and keeping an eye on. If there's any alterations to the original approved project, that's something that we're always keeping an eye on. Was there a particular change that you noticed, or?
Yes, I noticed that the main structure was being raised up about 3.5 or 4 feet, and I didn't think that was part of the project. Part of one of the original arguments was they were going to restore the staircase in front to its original size and shape, and with the raise, and if indeed my memory is wrong, and that was part of what we voted on, the 3.5 feet for the structure. That I guess is fine, but I don't think it was really. And having this, when you see raised structures around town, and none of them have come up before the committees in the 7 years or so that I've been on, it's really not a nice look having that tall staircase in the front that almost extends to the sidewalk. And if that was not part of what we voted on, and that they're planning on doing it now, I would like to see it come before the committee again.
Sure, and I'll definitely provide a summary in terms of the original scope that was presented to the HCPC. It also went through City Council through that documentation, and I can provide it in the next meeting. But we're closely working with that project.
Okay, well, at some point, as they're working, we'll have a fait accompli on our hands. And it's always costs more and takes longer to undo work. So I do feel, again, assuming I'm right, a sense of urgency on that.
I think that jacking up the building was temporary, and I think it's actually been put back down to its original elevation. If it hasn't yet been yet, I'm pretty sure it's going to be. Just having worked on that at one point. But yeah, good observation if not. But I think it is going to return to its original. But since you brought that up, I'd like to ask about one other project that came before us some time ago, which was at the corner of Eli and Corona. You know, it's kind of an outlier parcel, but, you know, there was some real weird legal complications with that. And I know at the time the guy was trying to do the right thing, and he thought he was doing the right thing, and he was having a new baby, and he needed to build a bedroom. And it looks like no work has been done there in 2 years since we've heard that. And I'm just wondering if, I'm not asking for an answer now because I don't think anybody was here then, but I would like to know, you know, what happened with that and if that guy was ever able to resolve that. I mean, he was tied to a condition of approval from a subdivision map that he wasn't aware of, and it's just one of those unfortunate things that I'm just curious about. I don't remember the specific address, but it's Corona and Eli. If we can look that up, see if the permit's closed, or I don't know.
Do you have a time frame? Was it, say, 2015 or?
No,
Okay.
it was 2021 or two.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Sure.
Yeah.
During COVID?
Yeah, that's right. Right. Okay. All right, then, planning manager's report.
Great, thank you. And Chair, regarding 26 6th Street, that was my understanding as well, was that they had to elevate the building in order to do the work. They had done the subterranean basement, and that they had to elevate it to complete that work and then would drop it back down. But Isabel will check in on that, and I can assure you we keep a very close eye on that project for several reasons. So we get regular requests about it. Thank you also for your comments. I think that one thing that's interesting is, as planners, as a profession, we perform a variety of roles in the development process and for communities, right? So, some planners work on the private side with developers, developing master plans and such. But our role is to be public planners for the city of Petaluma. And that is a role that we take very seriously and we work diligently to pursue. And I think that the primary point of that role is to ensure that for all of the applicants and for the city, that we're providing objective, fair, consistent, and transparent planning review of any application that comes before us at any time. I think that's partly our charge as planners, as professionals, but then it's also what we need to do in order to ensure that due process for property owners and for applicants is enforced and is maintained. So we kind of also see that charge coming from the U.S. Constitution as it trickles down through various federal laws and state laws, and then enforcing as well the regulations and the laws of the city of Petaluma. So I think it's always good to keep in mind that while we are planners broadly, when we work for the city of Petaluma, we are public planners and we do perform in that role. So thank you. A note on, and I'll follow up on with Mr. Perlis and with you, Chair, on this separately. I would like to better understand, before we come into the next meeting and discuss structures of merit, what you might be wanting from that program, so that we can work with Mr. Brady and do the analysis to determine if we would need to look at some regulatory modifications, or if it might just be an administrative policy that we could flesh out and evolve. So just know that I'll be following up with you on that. The landmark designation, I think while we want to have some discussion at the next meeting, I think in the interim, I want to work with Isabel to understand what information we might need as part of the proposal in order to fully evaluate a landmark designation application and bring it forward. I think that's important in terms of understanding cost and understanding what an application would look like that we could bring forward. So we'll have that information, and we'll work with everybody to advance that before the next meeting. And then also, the Secretary of the Interior Boot Camp, I believe that Uriel had shared that opportunity with everybody. I think they've completed their first meeting, and there's 2 more workshops or training sessions. So I thought that looked very interesting. I wish I had the time to do that. So I hope that somebody's taking advantage of that opportunity. And then in terms of future meetings, we do have, of course, the Joint Planning Commission HCPC meeting on August 8th, beginning at 6 p.m. And the study session is the only agenda item, so we will be moving straight into that study session. And then, of course, we are planning a meeting for September 5th, provided that we do have a quorum. So we'll be reaching out for a quorum check. If we're unable to attain a quorum, then we would just continue meeting item 2 that you continued today. Because we continued it to a date certain of the next regularly scheduled meeting, we would be able to continue that to October if we didn't get a quorum. So just to let you know about that. And then I believe that that's all of the notes that I had then for today's meeting. If anybody has any questions? No? Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, with that, we're adjourned at just about 5:01. Thanks, everybody.